would appear to be pipe bombs in the mail this morning. That news sparked a massive investigation into the obvious question: who sent these explosives and why? None of the devices exploded or harmed anyone. Details remain sparse, but Fox's Trace Gallagher has been covering this story from the very beginning and joins us with the very latest. Trace?
And Tucker, a law enforcement source tells us the choice of pipe bombs in packages is unusual because there's no easy or obvious method of detonation. But authorities also say that while these pipe bombs were rudimentary, they appear to be functional, and at least one contained projectiles, including shards of glass, to inflict as much damage as possible. The FBI says the packages were mailed in manila envelopes with computer-printed address labels, and they all had 6 forever stamps on them. Those are stamps that can be used anytime, regardless of price changes. And all of the devices had a return address of Florida Congresswoman and former DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Sources also tell us there is strong evidence that these attempted attacks are the work of one group or individual. Over the past 2 days, there have been 10 reports of suspicious packages. 4 have been ruled out. 1 is still being investigated, and 5 have now been confirmed, including to the Clintons, the Obamas, billionaire liberal donor George Soros, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and former CIA Director John Brennan. Brennan's envelope was delivered to CNN. And New York City Police Commissioner James O'Neill says investigators are reviewing security video to see if they can identify the courier who delivered the CNN package. Today, President Trump condemned what he called acts of political violence, but Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer said, quoting, President Trump's words ring hollow until he reverses his statements that condone acts of violence. Of course, the GOP has blamed Democrats for inciting numerous acts of violence against Republicans. The FBI, by the way, warns more packages could be out there. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks for that. Well, those pipe bombs, of course, are one of but many examples of attempted and actual political violence we've seen over the past few years. One of the most notable was an attempted massacre at a congressional baseball practice in the summer of 2017. Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana was gravely wounded in that shooting. In response to the pipe bomb mailings today, he tweeted this, quote, "These attempted attacks that have been made are beyond criminal. They are acts of pure terror. Violence and terror have no place in our politics or anywhere else in our society." Congressman Steve Scalise joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks very much for coming on. So what was your first reaction when you saw this news today?
Well, Tucker, it's anger. This isn't the way that we should expect America to be turning. I mean, you're seeing more and more of this, and clearly you're seeing it on both sides. We all need to be calling it out. Obviously, we need to find out what happened, and the FBI is in the process of doing it. I feel very confident that our law enforcement officials are ultimately going to find out who did this, and if it's one or multiple people, to bring them to justice and do it as swiftly as possible.
So the president condemned these acts and was immediately rebuked by the Democratic Party for condemning the acts not quite enough. What do you make of that?
I thought that was a mistake on their part to criticize the president. I think it was important that the president did come out with his statement the way he did, strongly. I heard silence a lot of times when Republicans were under attack from Democrat leaders. We all should be calling this out. When a Republican or Democrat is under attack, first of all, we don't even know who did it. We should be trying to find out who did it, but we should be criticizing the act, whether it's a Republican or Democrat. Some people only criticize when it's a Democrat under attack. And the media, by the way, was under attack, too, and there's no place for that either.
How do we de-escalate this? Things seem to be moving in a direction that's ominous. And so what do our leaders need to do, to the extent they have control, to pull us back?
I think the most important thing is to get back to what made this country great. Our founders didn't set up some kind of system where everybody had to think the same way. In fact, they challenged their government, and they wanted a system where individual people can speak their views and even speak out against their government, and they put the First Amendment ultimately in the Constitution to ensure that right. But the difference is we all have, our disagreements. You should never make those personal, and you should never think that violence is a way to settle our political differences. We settle them at the ballot box. We have an election in 13 days. That's where we settle our differences. Violence is never an answer to somebody's political disagreement with somebody else.
It's a wise and interesting point you make. So you're saying that people feel less free to express their opinions now than they have in previous generations, and that's part of the reason things are so volatile?
Well, you know, when somebody tries to use threats or intimidation, it's like the schoolyard bully. You know, if they don't want to confront their own demons, they try to threaten you and scare you away from just living your everyday life. And that's not who we are as Americans. You saw it after September 11th, when our very way of life was under attack by people who had a totally different viewpoint of America and what it stands for. And we came together as a country and we said, we're not going to back down. We're not going to change who we are. And we shouldn't do it here either, but we should be equally vigilant, Republican and Democrat, no matter who is under attack, that it's wrong for whoever did the attack. Let's find out the details. Don't try to deflect blame and try to blame somebody else who had nothing to do with this. Let's actually go after the people who did it. That's what we should do in coming together as Americans. And again, I mean, it's not about philosophy. I'm a conservative. I have liberal friends. I have disagreements with them. But I don't make it personal, and none of us should make it personal. We should want to find out who did it. Let's get the facts. Don't go trying to blame people that had nothing to do with this. Let's all be focused on coming together and finding out who did it and bringing them to justice.
Coming from a man who is very close to being murdered for his political beliefs, your words carry weight on that for sure. Congressman, thank you.
Always great to be with you, Tucker.
The massive caravan of migrants moving northward toward our border is growing exponentially tonight. Now it's more than 14,000 people strong. No nation other than ours is trying to stop them. Why is that? Chris Kobach joins us next. And we're monitoring the Trump rally underway in Wisconsin this evening. We'll take you there immediately live if news occurs, and it may.
But other people just march right in. It will not happen. You watch.
Well, the massive migrant caravan headed for our southern border from Honduras is getting more massive by the day. Reportedly, it has swelled to 14,000 people. Despite the hundreds of millions of dollars that American taxpayers hand out to Central American countries and Mexico, no government in the region seems interested at all in stopping the migrants as they move toward Texas. Once they arrive in Texas, across the Rio Grande River, the group will inevitably be met by left-wing lawyers who specialize in manipulating our dysfunctional immigration system, and they are all but ensured permanent residency in this country if history is any guide. And that, of course, is the main reason so many of them are coming now. One of our major political parties strongly supports all of this. That's not speculation. They say it out loud often. Watch.
We are a country that our strength has always been that we are a tolerant country, that we are welcoming, in particular, of those who have fled harm.
The people of Central America, many are at risk. If they qualify for asylum, we believe there should be a process in which that case can be heard in a fair manner, protecting the individuals.
What's the Democratic Party's message about the caravan?
We are a nation of laws, and the laws that are on the books deal with issues of refugee and asylum status. And our laws require that people be treated with dignity and given that process.
A nation of laws that must be ignored. Disagree with any of that, by the way? Do you think nations need borders in order to be nations? Did you imagine that as an American citizen, you should have some voice in who comes into our country? The cable news geniuses have a message for you. Shut up, racist.
It gets Trump's nativist base very, very excited every day, and they look at these people as less than human. They believe that those folks are less than human, and they believe that they don't deserve asylum. They believe that, you know, the kids in cages was a net benefit for this country.
Donald Trump wants you to know that he hates the same people you hate. If you hate Muslims, if you hate black people, if you hate anyone who lives south of the Rio Grande.
Rick Wilson, for the record, maybe the dumbest person ever to appear on television. Chris Kobach, meanwhile, is a Republican. He's running for governor of Kansas. He does believe in borders, and he joins us tonight. So thanks very much for coming on. I think most people, when thinking about immigration, have thought in terms of barriers. How do you strengthen the border? But this appears to be, this caravan, a perfect example of what's actually happening, which is people who have no right to be here leveraging our legal system against us, something that border walls can't stop.
That's exactly right, Tucker. You know, what I think they're attempting to do is you're right, as you said in the intro, they're going to be met by all kinds of liberal lawyers, and they're going to try to claim asylum. And the thing is, they have no basis whatsoever for claiming asylum. They do not face persecution by the government in their home countries, which is the essence of asylum. But because they, under our laws, at least get a hearing, a credible fear hearing, and we don't have enough detention beds to detain 14,000 people while they get those hearings, many of them probably will be let go with a slip saying, please come back on such and such a day. And they won't come back, or they may try to come back and try to fake it through the hearing. But it is absurd how they are abusing our asylum system, abusing our laws, and they are aided and abetted by the American left.
Well, so it's a little disingenuous because they can't be held, because then it would be you're holding human beings in pens like animals, you racist. They can't be returned into Mexico because they're not Mexican nationals. They're from Central America. And so we don't have a choice under the rules written by the people complaining that we're inhumane to do anything but let them free. And so basically they're subverting our law with the assistance of people who solemn face are telling us we just want to obey the law. I mean, it's like Orwellian.
Yeah, it is Orwellian. And, you know, you mentioned earlier the Democrats and how they're talking about this. Let's just think about this. In the 90s, this is like the third stage of open border psychosis. In the 90s, the Democrats wanted to enforce the law. Bill Clinton signed the Illegal Immigration Reform Act, which is all about enforcement. Then in the 2000s, they were like, okay, now we want amnesty. We're not for enforcing the law. We want amnesty. But now in 2018, they're going beyond that, and they're saying, we want to bring in more illegal aliens. We're not content with the millions here already. We're for bringing people in from outside of the country who have no basis for coming to the United States.
At some point, doesn't this raise questions about what democracy is? I mean, if every poll for 50 years demonstrates that most Americans of both parties want real borders, they want to have a say in who comes and lives here and benefits from our society, and consistently they have no voice at all, then what do you start to wonder about democracy? Maybe it's fake.
You know, it's quite clear that the political left in America is not listening to what the people are saying. And you're absolutely right. The polls constantly show that Americans don't want to be giving taxpayer benefits to illegal aliens. They don't want sanctuary cities. We have been rewarding illegal immigration against the will of the American people for too long. This is a problem we can solve. If you want to stop illegal immigration, stop rewarding illegal immigration. Right. That's one of the most important reasons why I'm running for governor in Kansas. But the political left doesn't want to do that.
And if you want to keep people tolerant and pro-immigrant, then let them decide who gets to come here. I mean, what they're doing is making people who are basically for immigration anti-immigration, because it's so unreasonable that reasonable people are getting disgusted. I mean, anyway, Chris Kobach, thank you for being a consistent and clear voice on this issue. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Immigration, of course, was one of the decisive issues, maybe the decisive issue in the last presidential election. What does the caravan mean, if anything, for the 2018 midterms 13 days from now? Dana Perino hosts the Daily Briefing. She served as press secretary for President George W. Bush. She's seen this topic emerge and evolve, and she thinks deeply about all this stuff all the time, and she joins us now. So does this, Dana, I mean, I can't exactly tell where this is going, or if maybe Republicans are overstating its effect or understating it. I mean, what effect is this going to have, do you think?
Well, it's possible that Republicans are overstating this issue and understating health care. But the truth, that could also be said for Democrats, that they're overstating health care and underreporting on immigration. Look, I think if you just look at the Senate, the red state Democrats that are running for re-election, this is not good news for them. Claire McCaskill and Joe Donnelly in particular, Missouri and Indiana. These are states that President Trump won by over 20 points. Immigration was one of their #1 issues for those voters. So this issue being talked about in the last 2 weeks before the midterm election, which is very close anyway, that's probably not good news for them. Conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. would say that it's not good for Republicans to talk about immigration in the way that you and Chris Kobach were just talking about. However, look at some of the purple states. Dean Heller in Nevada, the incumbent there, the most vulnerable Senate Republican running for re-election, he has opened up a 6-point lead in Nevada. Martha McSally in Arizona now has a lead over her opponent there. So the Democrats really want to focus on and talk about health care. And they could be right. On election night, that could be the main reason that people come out to vote. But this immigration issue with all of these visuals, it's not like it isn't happening. Getting the word out, Republicans getting the word out, could have a difference in some of these coin flip districts as well.
I've always thought that Republicans lied to themselves with the popularity of universal health care. People actually want their health care taken care of, whether they should or not. But if you're taking that position, which is the Democratic position, how do you square that with your immigration views? Letting in tens of millions of more people who also get that health care, doesn't that dilute the promise of the government? I mean, like, how can you pay for that?
Well, they don't. That's not of their concern. That is something that Republicans have to worry about later on, and then they try to fix it, and then they're the mean ones that have to deal with it. I was also thinking of it in another way, because you talked about reasonable people on immigration. I'd like to think that, most people say she's probably one of them. I have a real soft spot for refugees, the refugees who are being persecuted by their governments, hounded by their governments, basically treated terribly, sometimes kidnapped, sometimes targeted for murder for their political beliefs. That is not what's happening here.
I know.
The best way to deal with economic migrants is to actually practice capitalism in those countries. That is what's made this country strong. I'm for helping them in that way, but I feel like Democrats are missing the picture. I would like to have more refugees, actual refugees, be allowed into this country. But if you allow economic migrants into the country and they take up those spaces, you're actually hurting the very ideals that our country was founded on.
This level of lying is making us all cynical, including me. I'm trying to fight it, but it's having that
You're
effect.
never cynical.
I'm trying. Dana, it's great to see you, and thank you for your measured and thoughtful analysis, as always.
See you soon.
Several Russia investigations have failed so far to prove that Trump got elected because of Putin. But the Democrats are promising to launch another investigation if they retake Congress. Alan Dershowitz does not think that's a particularly good plan. He's here next to explain why. We're also monitoring the president's rally in Wisconsin for news. There may be some. If there is, we'll bring it to you immediately. Here's what the president just said about today's bomb scares across the country. Watch.
Of political laws are an attack on our democracy itself. No nation can succeed that tolerates violence or the threat of violence as a method of political intimidation, coercion, or control. We all know that. Such conduct must be fiercely opposed and firmly prosecuted. We want all sides to come together in peace and harmony. We can do it. We can do it.
After 2 full years and several separate investigations have so far failed to prove that Russia, quote, hacked our election, Democrats are pledging still another Russia probe if they retake the House of Representatives. But that's not their only goal. The vast majority of Democratic voters, according to opinion polling, say they want the Democrats to impeach the president if they retake the Congress. Alan Dershowitz is an emeritus professor at Harvard Law School and the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump, and he joins us tonight. Professor, do you think that we need another Russia probe?
No, I don't think we do. I think we'll learn a lot from the report that Mueller will release. If we did need a probe, it should be a nonpartisan 9/11 type objective probe. The last thing we need is a partisan probe whose purpose it is to demonize the other party and to try to gain partisan advantage. That's not what the American public needs, and I think the Democrats will shoot themselves in the foot if they fritter away their power as a check and balance if they do regain the House by looking to the past instead of looking to the future.
So that kind of is the question, actually. Do you get partisan advantage even by talking about Russia? Well, presumably, if you're a Democrat, there are lots of things you disagree with that Trump believes. Why not argue about those? Why still Russia?
It's ridiculous, I think. And I do think that in the end, they would get short-term partisan advantage. But in the end, I think the long-term disadvantages would be obvious. We saw that happen when Bill Clinton was impeached. It turned very negative on the Republicans. And I think even those who participated in the impeachment now regret that. And I think that the Democrats should learn the lesson. If they are fortunate enough to regain the House, they should use that as a way of checking and balancing and exercising their constitutional authority, trying to work with the Republicans and come up with some compromise programs that won't satisfy anybody 100%, but that's the nature of a divided government. You come up with compromises. Think back to the days, when Ted Kennedy would work so closely with McCain and others. I think we need to see that happening again, and if the Democrats regain control and they're smart, they will try to reach out to moderate Republicans and try to come up with some programs that help the American public rather than just achieve short-term partisan results.
The impeachment talk strikes me as strange. I mean, you're the constitutional scholar here, obviously, but my understanding is you need 3/4 of the Senate to vote for conviction in order to remove a president with impeachment. That's not going to happen. So given that it's not going to happen, why are they considering it?
Well, for the same reason that they considered it with Bill Clinton. The House could conceivably get a majority to impeach. It's very easy to impeach. It's not easy to impeach constitutionally, but the House can act unconstitutionally. Maxine Waters has already said the criteria for impeachment is anything the House wants. She wants to impeach not only President Trump, but Vice President Pence as well. It would just be a show trial, and they might get enough votes. I don't think they will. I think there'd be enough sensible Democrats to understand that this would not be a positive thing for the Democratic Party, certainly leading up to 2020. And as soon as the midterms are over, 2020 begins. And I think it would be a way of frittering away the advantage the Democrats have gotten by taking over the House. It also, even the talk of it now, hurts their chances of winning the House. I don't think Americans want to vote for an impeachment. I don't think they want to vote for more investigations of Russia. I think they want to vote for candidates who will move the country forward.
And you see it in the polling even. The Democrats who are doing unexpectedly well are talking about health insurance, health care questions, actual economic matters. This is an obvious nonpartisan point that you're making. I'm agreeing with you. Why is it not obvious to Democratic leaders?
Well, I think it is obvious to some Democratic leaders. The problem is the leaders today don't have control over the party because the successes have come from young radicals who are winning small elections in obscure places that don't represent what Americans really think. I think most Americans are centrists, and the movement to the left of the Democratic Party does not represent the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And I would hope the leaders would recognize that. The same thing is true of Republicans. The extreme right wing, which is winning in a few places, doesn't represent the core of the Republican Party. I think the Americans benefit when both parties move to the middle, when there are great debates between conservatives and liberals. That's where the debate should happen, instead of screaming matches between the radicals on the left and the radicals on the right. That's not the America that made us great.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, great to see you tonight. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, before the recent reemergence of identity politics in this country, candidates were typically held to account if they were, say, caught taking bribes or burning flags. Not so much anymore. Two prominent Democrats, both accused of those things, and they're still polling at the same level or better than they were previously. That's because identity politics has shifted the burden for politicians. Rather than campaigning on results and substance and issues and ideas, they simply make appeals to what you look like, who your ancestors were. That's a topic that's addressed in great detail in a new book called Ship of Fools, available for purchase on TuckerCarlson.com.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. We begin tonight with what could be the hottest trend in domestic terrorism, package bombs. Several suspicious packages were sent to high-profile political figures, one in care of CNN, over the past several hours. None of those bombs exploded. No one was hurt. The Secret Service says Bill and Hillary Clinton and former President Obama were never in any danger from packages sent to them and intercepted by screeners. CNN evacuated its New York offices after a suspicious package was delivered and discovered in its mailroom addressed to former CIA Director John Brennan. President Trump called the instance today abhorrent to everything Americans hold dear and sacred. We have Fox team coverage. John Roberts at the White House with more reaction from the president and the administration, the careful framing of the message. And we start off, though, with Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge here in the Bureau with specifics on what was sent and intercepted. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett, and good evening. FBI Director Christopher Wray issued a statement late today asking for the public's help, saying no piece of information is too small and warning there may be more packages out there. In a matter of hours, multiple suspicious packages identified across 4 jurisdictions, targeting high-profile Democrats, a former CIA director, and the New York offices of a national cable network.
There's a fire alarm here.
You might have heard it in the background. We're going to find out what the latest is
we'll
here
be right back.
at CNN. We're going to be right back.
This device addressed to former CIA Director John Brennan was discovered in the CNN mailroom with excessive postage and packaging, all red flags, along with a potentially dangerous substance.
Responding officers identified a device that appeared to be a live explosive device. Additionally, there was an envelope containing white powder that was discovered as part of that original packaging.
The Secret Service confirmed its routine mail screening intercepted suspicious packages addressed to former President Barack Obama at his Washington home, and former Secretary of State and First Lady Hillary Clinton addressed to their Chappaqua, New York residence.
After that, we were notified by the Secret Service that they had received a nearly identical package in Washington addressed to the Obamas. At that point, we began to take additional proactive steps.
A federal law enforcement official told Fox there were also similarities to a device recovered Monday at the home of billionaire Democratic donor George Soros, adding investigators' working theory is that an individual or a group is behind all of the packages. In Florida, Hillary Clinton thanked the Secret Service, then turned to the political climate.
It's a time of deep divisions, and we have to do everything we can to bring our country together.
The official said a suspicious package addressed to former Attorney General Eric Holder was not delivered and sent to the return address listed as the Florida office of Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Late in the day, Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters said her office was also targeted. The criminal case is now led by the Secret Service and FBI.
I want to assure you that the reason we are here because the totality of the federal, state, and local authorities will investigate this thoroughly.
The FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia is handling forensic testing. In a recent interview, a senior FBI intelligence analyst and expert on homemade bombs noted a troubling trend was emerging.
We have seen probably an increase in parcel bombs, people making their own explosives that are very sensitive, that are very volatile.
Also in his statement late today, FBI Director Wray provided more details about the packages, each one mailed in a manila envelope with interior bubble wrap, 6 forever stamps with the same return address, and computer-printed address labels. A former federal investigator tells Fox News that such printers can embed identification codes into the actual print that can be used by investigators to link the packages, Brett.
We should point out this has become so sophisticated, one would think these investigators are going to grab onto something pretty quickly.
Based on the conversations we had this afternoon, investigators said that there really was a wealth of forensic evidence. To me, that's tipping their hat to they feel they've got a lot to work with and some good, strong leads to follow.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, the president is being circumspect in his comments about the package bombs in what is a highly charged partisan environment, of course. The president made a somber statement today at the White House calling for unity. House and Senate minority leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer released a joint statement saying the president's comments, quote, ring hollow because of past statements he's made at rallies during which they insist he condones violence. Trump supporters, of course, say left-wing Democrats are stirring up confrontations around the country. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the White House angle tonight from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. The political discourse and tolerance of opposing political views in this country has deteriorated to the point where many people were warning it was only just a matter of time before something like this happened.
We're extremely angry, upset, unhappy about what we witnessed this morning, and we will get to the bottom of it.
With the crosshairs being set on some of his fiercest political critics, President Trump was careful to keep politics far away from his response to the potentially deadly mailings.
The safety of the American people is my highest and absolute priority. The full weight of our government is being deployed to conduct this investigation and bring those responsible for these despicable acts to justice.
In a surprise move, opening an event on combating opioid addiction, the First Lady added her condemnation of the terrorist acts.
We cannot tolerate those cowardly attacks, and I strongly condemn all
who choose violence.
With the midterms just 13 days away, the rhetoric on both sides of the political aisle has become highly charged.
Michelle says that, when they go low, we go high. No. When they go low, we kick them.
Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind of...
And while he is headlining a campaign rally in the hotly contested state of Wisconsin tonight, the president today urged Americans to set aside their political differences.
We have to unify. We have to come together and send one very clear, strong, unmistakable message that acts or threats of political violence of any kind have no place in the United States of America.
But with so much at stake on November 6th, political comity likely won't last long. President Trump continues to blame Democrats for the migrant caravan and illegal immigration. But he did find common ground with one Democrat, then Senator Barack Obama, and what he said in 2005.
We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants in this country.
President Trump tweeting last night, quote, "I agree with President Obama 100%. The president also sending a strong message about his intent to defend U.S. sovereignty, tweeting, "We are a great sovereign nation. We have strong borders and will never accept people coming into our country illegally." President Trump is in Mosinee, Wisconsin tonight, where Republican Governor Scott Walker is in a fight for his political life. Republicans are worried about turnout in the Badger State, so watch for the president tonight to turn up the political heat, despite his calls this afternoon for unity. Brad?
It'll be interesting to watch. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Let's talk more about how these kinds of situations are handled. Michael Balboni is former Deputy Secretary for Public Safety and Homeland Security Advisor for New York State. He joins us from New York City. Michael, thanks for being here. I want to put up a map here of where all these packages were. You see the Clintons in Chappaqua getting their mail was screened, didn't get to them, as same for the Obamas in Washington, D.C. You have the George Soros over the weekend getting a pipe bomb package. CNN in New York addressed to the former CIA Director John Brennan. Maxine Waters going through the Capitol Hill screening facility, and then addressed to Eric Holder, former Attorney General, but return address to Wasserman Schultz, the Congresswoman down in Florida, and those are all happening today. Where does the investigation go at the initial stages here?
So what has happened, obviously, is that they have done the FBI, as the lead agency with the Secret Service, has done the forensic analysis of the crime scenes and of the devices themselves. What is very beneficial for investigators is that the device is intact, that they can possibly look at whether or not there's fingerprints or under the labeling or any type of DNA that might be there. That's very helpful. But what has been really kind of confusing today for a lot of people looking at the situation is if someone is able to take these types of packages, do this type of coordinated attack, but yet send them to places where the chances of them actually getting to the target are very remote. Anyone who has any understanding, the most remedial understanding of how the Secret Service does their security, knows that the Congresswoman is not going to go and open the package themselves. It's not going to be anywhere near Congress. It's going to be in a remote facility. And the same thing with the protectees, the former presidents. So why go through this? And, of course, the other question is, and thank God, why none of them detonated? Right. So were these, in fact, just a message, or were they, in fact, functional devices that just didn't happen to go off because of a flaw in the detonator? These are all questions that are being asked right now. For political purposes, what is out there? And the difficulty there is that many people jump into the conclusion it must be political. And the comment I just want to say is an investigation should lead itself. You shouldn't presume any type of fact that's not in evidence.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation out there today. Michael, last thing very quickly, in your estimation, just knowing how these things work, do you think they're going to find this person or people?
That is the question, and the challenge, of course, is you've got all this information, there's all this evidence, but a lot of things don't add up right now, and I think there's a little bit more of a level of sophistication, and I really don't want to put that much pressure on the folks to do this right now. They let them do it the right way. So let's not rush to judgment on this. Get this done the right way, because remember, this is going to be put for prosecution with the Justice Department. So you got to make sure you have the chain of evidence and you have the right case against the individual who ultimately will be found.
Michael Balboni, a former Deputy Secretary for Public Safety, Homeland Security Advisor for New York State. Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
Several people have been shot at a grocery store on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky. At least 2 people were killed there. It happened at a Kroger store in Jeffersontown, Kentucky. Police say a suspect is in custody. Technology companies led another steep sell-off on Wall Street today. Traders concerned about future growth amid rising inflation, interest rates, and, of course, uncertainty over trade in the battle with China. The Dow finished down 608 today. The S&P 500 dumped 85. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 are now negative for 2018. The NASDAQ was the worst of the bunch today, losing 329. That's almost 4.5%, the largest one-day percentage decline since August 18th, 2011. Let's get some analysis of the market activity today. Deirdre Bolton is of the Fox Business Network, joins us. Deirdre, wish there was better news today. Good evening.
Indeed. Yeah, you gave a lot of those reasons, Brett, why we saw this kind of pressure. So Dow, S&P 500, of course, in the red for the year, as you alluded to. And then the NASDAQ, its steepest decline in more than 7 years. That index on pace for its worst month since the credit crisis, never a good comparison, in October 2008. So Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Alphabet, Google, all closing down by each more than 5%. One trader told me most of corporate America is delivering solid earnings, but investors are anxious about 2 key factors: rising interest rates, which makes all borrowing more expensive, and the prospect of slowing global economic growth. Almost a third of S&P 500 companies have reported quarterly results. 81% have beaten estimates, but there are pockets in the industrial sector that have cited effect of tariffs, and that's making investors worry about which other sectors could be hurt. To add weight to sentiment, housing data released this morning show new home sales plunged to a 2-year low. For years, the housing story has really been about strong demand and limited supply. Experts say that dynamic is shifting as unrelenting price gains and higher mortgage rates keep would-be home buyers out of the market. Some housing analysts say part of that September drop is due to Hurricane Michael, but most agree the bigger picture is a market under pressure. Housing and housing services are about 18% of U.S. GDP. After today's close, though, Microsoft posting really strong results, as did beleaguered Tesla. So 2 potential bright spots in tomorrow's session. Brett.
Okay, Deirdre, thank you. Lottery officials say someone bought a ticket in South Carolina to win last night's Mega Millions jackpot worth a total of $1,537 million. The earlier estimate of $1.6 billion would have been the biggest ever, but actual sales came in just short of a 2016 Powerball prize shared by winners in 3 states. As of right now, we still do not know who last night's lucky winner is, and we don't have to. In South Carolina, they say that's the law. Saudi Arabia's crown prince is calling the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi a heinous crime that cannot be justified. It was Mohammed bin Salman's official response since the controversy erupted. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has the latest.
The search for clues in the grisly Istanbul killing of Jamal Khashoggi intensifies. Investigators searching the Saudi Arabian consul's residence in a 75-foot deep well where it's suspected the dismembered body of Khashoggi might have been stashed. This is Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man some suspect of masterminding the crime, made his first public comment since the killing at a financial conference many have shunned due to the death.
The crime was really painful to all Saudis. And I believe it is painful to every human in the world. It is a heinous crime that cannot be justified.
Still, in the wake of the incident, one of his principal supporters backed away a bit more. The prince is running things over there more so at this stage. The crown prince, he's running things, and so if anybody were going to be in, it would be him. As more clues turn up, including video of a Saudi diplomatic car spotted in another possible dumping ground for Khashoggi's body.
We are determined not to allow a cover-up of this murder and to make sure all those responsible, from those who ordered it to those who carried it out, will not be allowed to avoid justice.
The investigation was also discussed in a phone call between the Turkish president and the Saudi crown prince. As more countries expressed outrage at the crime, the UK joining the US in banning Saudi suspects in the murder from travel to their country.
We condemn the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the strongest possible terms. And after his disappearance, we made clear that Saudi Arabia must cooperate with Turkey.
CIA Director Gina Haspel reportedly spent 7 hours with her intel counterpart during her trip to Turkey. She is said to have gotten access to all the evidence in the Khashoggi killing case. More than enough, it would seem, to give President Trump a full debrief. Brett.
Greg Palcott in London. Greg, thank you. Up next, what some Central American migrants expect if they make it to the U.S. and how reality could be much different. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in New York as a 7th child dies in a severe viral outbreak at a New Jersey rehabilitation center. The state health department says there have been 18 cases overall of adenovirus at the Wanacue Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation in Haskell, about 30 miles northwest of New York. Fox 11 in Los Angeles as a plane crash lands on the Ventura